Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jessica, and if you're not, welcome back. Today's video is going to be all about postpartum and labor and delivery. So I am 34 weeks pregnant with baby girl number 2, and as her due date quickly approaches, it's got me thinking back to my labor and delivery with my first daughter and things that I wish that I had known about before I went into labor. So that's what this video is all about. I hope that it helps out some new moms or moms to be, or maybe you just get a kick out of it. But it's things that I didn't know, and talking to some of my mom friends, they didn't necessarily know either going into labor. So stay tuned and we will get started. So the first thing that I want to talk about is we're going to start from the very beginning. You started, or you went into labor, or you're starting active labor, your contractions are close together, and it's time to call your doctor to go to the hospital. Take a shower before you go. I knew my doctor was going to tell me to do that anyway, so I went ahead and did it, took a shower, and got myself ready and got the car loaded and everything. And then I called my physician and she told me, yep, sounds like you're in labor, go to the hospital. What we did not do and should have done on the way to the hospital is stopped and gotten food. Stop and get food on the way to the hospital. I promise you, you will thank me later. You can pack all the snacks in the world, but let's face it, your husband or significant other is gonna eat 90% of those snacks. Stop and get food. Once I was admitted into the laboring room, because the hospital I delivered at, you go into a triage area first for them to evaluate you and see if you're actually progressing, or progressing fast enough for them to admit you. Once you're admitted to the laboring suite, you're on a liquid diet. If you want food, it's like Jello, juice, and chicken broth. Nobody wants that. Stop and get yourself some food. Don't get anything too heavy or anything like that, but stop and get some food. You'll feel better. You'll have more energy going into labor if you do that than you do if you eat Jello and chicken broth. So stop and get food. And then you won't feel as angry when your mom and dad bring your husband McDonald's when you haven't eaten in like 10 hours. Eat food. Basically, just make sure you eat before you come to the hospital. You'll feel better about it, and you'll thank me later, trust me. The next thing I want to talk about that I wasn't really aware of was back labor. With my first pregnancy and delivery, I started with normal contractions that like are a band across your stomach where your whole stomach tightens. And that quickly turned into back labor, where you feel your contractions all in your back and down into your butt. And they are not pleasant. I mean, no contraction is really pleasant, but back labor sucks. Whenever I was having normal contractions, I was able to use pressure points and breathing techniques to breathe through them and get through them, and I was fine. As soon as it moved into my back and they got closer together and they got stronger, it was harder for me to breathe through them and stretch through them and walk through them and all of these other things that I had practiced and planned on doing through my labor to get through contractions. So back labor is no joke, and it sucks. I also have scoliosis in my lower back, so that made it more uncomfortable, since it is right where I was having contractions. So keep that in mind when you're in labor. Back labor is a thing, and it sucks. Well, most contractions suck, but for me, it hurt more and took more out of me than the normal contractions that I had felt in the beginning. So keep that in mind. With my back labor and not being able to use the techniques that I had planned on using to get through labor, I did end up getting an epidural. I'm not going to go too much into detail on my labor and delivery in this video. I will be doing a full labor and delivery video comparison between my first labor and delivery and this one once she makes her appearance. I'll be doing that, so I'll talk a lot about what happened in my first labor and then compare it to things that happened in my second labor. But I did end up getting an epidural with my first labor, and something I did not realize was a thing was that the epidural doesn't always work the way you think it's gonna. So I got just a regular epidural. I didn't get the walking epidural where you can still walk around and it just kind of takes away the pain a little bit. I got a full epidural that numbs you from the waist down. So at least that's what it was supposed to do. With having scoliosis, getting an epidural in my back was a bit worrisome for me because of where the needle goes. Obviously the needle doesn't stay in your dural space. You end up with a little tube catheter in your back that administers your epidural whenever you push the button. So the anesthesiologist came in. I did let her know that I had scoliosis and where it was. It was already in my chart from my physician, and the nurse put it in the chart whenever I checked in because I told her as well. So she was aware, and they placed my epidural and everything was fine. I thankfully didn't have any residual back pain from the epidural after they took it out, but it did not work properly when they first placed it. So after they placed it, they laid me on my left side and they told me it was going to take probably about 10 minutes for it to fully kick in. Well, it only kicked in on my right side. I was tingly and partially numb on my right side, but I could still feel everything on my left side. I could still feel every contraction, all of the pain. So for me, epidural didn't work the first go around. So I called my nurse and she said, okay, well, we'll flip you to your right side and see if that helps. It didn't. So the next thing for her to try was, at least from what I remember, and this, y'all bear with me, it's been almost 3 years since I had a baby, but the next option was to push the med button with the max amount of times that you can push it within an hour to see if that helps. And I believe it's 4 times once every 10 minutes. So you can hit it a max of 4 times in an hour every 10 minutes. So my husband was in charge of my button. He did his job, push the button when he was supposed to, and it still didn't work. So they called the anesthesiologist back in and they gave me another full dose straight into my catheter in my back, and then it worked. So just keep that in mind if you do get an epidural, that if it only numbs one side, that can happen. And I don't know if it has to do with the fact that I have scoliosis, so my spine is curved, so the medicine didn't disperse properly or what, but it happened. They did fix it. I did end up being numb. So after the epidural, it was great. I was able to power nap a couple times, which was nice. So also with an epidural, I was not informed until after I got it that they can cause chills and shaking, like shivering. Shortly after I got my epidural and it fully kicked in, I was really cold and shaking and shivering. So they ended up giving me some warm blankets. But that is a side effect of an epidural, just so you know if you do get one. It is normal, it does happen, but it's kind of annoying. Moving right along through labor and delivery, there wasn't really much else that I was unaware of or was really a surprise to me through my labor that I can remember right now or think of right now. The rest of it went as smoothly as one can expect your first labor to go. That's all I have for labor right now. I may think of more things whenever I do my labor video, but so with postpartum, obviously we all know that you just had a baby, but what I did not know or did not comprehend, I guess, was how much bleeding occurs after you have a baby. It's a lot. And not everyone does, but I did pass clots after I had my daughter, which worried me a little bit because most people pass like small clots during their period, and that's normal. But these were like the size of quarters, and it freaked me out a little bit. So obviously I talked to my nurse and my providers, and they were like, no, it's fine. As long as they aren't the size of golf balls, which is like this big, you're fine. So as long as your clots aren't the size of golf balls, you're fine. But yeah, you do bleed a lot, which is why the hospital gives you mesh panties, which people have a love or hate relationship with those mesh panties. I personally liked the mesh panties. Wasn't a fan of the pads, but I don't like pads in general. And I bought different ones whenever I came home from the hospital. But the ones that they provide you in the hospital work perfectly fine. You don't need to bring your own if you don't want to. You don't need to bring adult diapers if you don't want to. Obviously, it's all your preference and what you feel makes you comfortable, but I was perfectly fine with the mesh panties and the pads. The mesh panties go up to your boobs. They're huge. I found that they were, pretty comfortable for being giant mesh panties. But the pads, they're huge. I'm pretty sure they're like, they're big. So if that's something that you don't like or don't want to deal with, I suggest you look into bringing your own pads or buying the adult dependent diapers. But I did not realize that that was a thing whenever I went in for labor and delivery. And in my postpartum state, I did not know that I was going to be bleeding that much that I would have to wear giant mesh panties and a giant pad. The next thing that I want to talk about is going to the bathroom after labor. I find that that's not really something that people talk about all that much. Your providers and your nurses may discuss it a little bit, but that's usually after you've already had the baby. And I've seen people kind of hint at it about how going to the bathroom is like after you have a baby. It's not pleasant, especially if you tear. I had a first degree tear, so it was pretty painful to go to the restroom. But the thing that I realized that most people don't talk about is pooping after you have a baby. It's hard and it sucks. So make sure that you get yourself some stool softeners from your physician or from the pharmacy or from Walgreens or wherever on your way home, because you're gonna need them, and it will make your life so much better if you use them. So definitely take care of yourself and get some stool softeners so you can poop. That first one is hard. After that, it's much better. But the first one after you have a baby, it's not good. It's not fun. Something that I did not do after I had my daughter, that I wish I had, I did, but not at the hospital, was take a shower. After I had my daughter, I ended up on an IV for 24 hours. And again, I'll explain all of that in my labor comparison video. But I was on an IV for 24 hours, and the bathroom in my room was not very big, and I didn't feel like fighting an IV pole into the bathroom to take a shower. So I didn't. Once I got home and took a shower, I felt so much better and so much more like myself and so much more like a human and a person that I fully intend on taking advantage of the showers at the hospital this go round. Do yourself a favor and take a shower at the hospital. Even if it's like a 2-minute shower where you're just rinsing off, you will feel better. You'll get all the grime and gross from labor off of you afterwards. It'll help your muscles relax because you're gonna be sore after you have a baby. So do yourself a favor and take a shower. The second to last thing that I want to talk about is breastfeeding related. I breastfed my daughter for 19 months and it was great. I loved every second of it. Well, except when she bit me. That wasn't fun. But breastfeeding was wonderful. It was hard in the beginning, but totally worth it in the end. So definitely, if you want to do that, do it. Don't give up on yourself. You can do it. It's hard. But also, if you can't, that's okay. But what I did not know was that you have contractions after you have a baby. After the baby comes out, your uterus is going to start trying to shrink back down to normal size, and so you're going to have contractions. and sometimes they hurt more than the actual contractions during labor. And if you're breastfeeding, the nipple stimulation causes them to be worse. So keep that in mind. The hospitals usually provide you ice packs and hot packs for that area to soothe and make it feel a little bit better, but they hurt. You continue to have contractions for at least another day, if not 2 days, while your uterus tries to shrink back down. Also, nurses come in and do fundus checks, and they will push on your uterus to make sure that it's going back down, which also does not feel great. So I'm warning you, they're gonna come in your room, they're gonna come push on your stomach right after you had a baby. It's not gonna be comfortable, and it's gonna suck. The last thing I want to talk about is more serious than the rest of this video. I've kind of joked through all of this video up until this point. The last thing that I want to talk about is something that a lot of people don't talk about, and that's postpartum anxiety. You hear a lot about people with postpartum depression. Your doctor will talk to you about postpartum depression, and you'll have friends who will talk to you about PPD. But something that a lot of people don't discuss is postpartum anxiety, and that is something that I dealt with. I did not really have any postpartum depression. I had baby blues after I had the baby, but postpartum anxiety is something that I really struggled with for a while, probably for about a year almost. And I still have episodes, I guess you would call them, still now, but I do have a history of anxiety. But postpartum anxiety for me was hard. You always hear about how you're gonna lose sleep when you have a baby because you just had a baby, and they don't sleep all the time, and you sleep when the baby sleeps, and they're gonna be waking up every 2 to 3 hours to eat, and you're not gonna sleep very much. What they don't tell you, or what I was not told, is about postpartum anxiety and how even though when your baby is sleeping, you won't be. Because every possible scenario that you could think of that could go wrong and harm you and your baby is gonna go through your head. Doesn't matter how irrational or ludicrous that these things are, and realistically, I knew that they weren't realistic fears, but they were still in my head and they were still keeping me awake at night, which made me very irritable, and it just made being a new mom harder than it needed to be. My husband actually ended up leaving for work a week after my daughter was born. He's in the Navy and he works on a submarine, and the submarine was leaving. It was a work trip. He left for a couple weeks, and my mom was actually leaving the same day that he was. Them both leaving at the same time really, really kickstarted my postpartum anxiety. So if you deal with postpartum anxiety, or if you're dealing with postpartum depression, or you think your baby blues are turning into them, or you think that they're lasting longer than most people say they should, talk to your physician. Talk to somebody. Talk to a friend, talk to a family member, talk to someone who you know is going to listen and be on your side and actually hear what you're saying. Make sure you definitely talk to your physician and have them evaluate you and see if you are dealing with that. My physician was amazing, and she checked on me multiple times a week. She would make sure that I was okay. She knew my husband was gone and was in the military, and so I love my OB out here. But when it comes to postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression, they're very serious things, and it's not something that you're going through on your own, even though it may feel like you are. So just make sure that you reach out to somebody, talk to somebody, and make sure that you get the help that you need so that you can be the best mom and parent that you can be. That's all I have for this video. Make sure you stay tuned for my upcoming videos. I have a what's in my hospital bag video coming up, and like I said, I'll be doing a labor comparison once baby girl gets here, and then towards the end of my pregnancy I am going to do a pregnancy comparison, because let me tell you, these two girls, their pregnancies are completely different. So stay tuned for those. If you would like to see a tutorial on how I did my makeup today, let me know in the comments below. If there's anything else that you didn't know before you had a baby and went into labor, drop it in the comments below, because there's a lot of stuff that I didn't think of, I'm sure. And there might be stuff that other moms didn't think of that are about to have a baby and they need your help. So drop it in the comments below. Make sure that you're nice if you leave a comment, and then of course like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you know when I post. It's every Monday and Friday, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.